Good evening to all of you. I'm Shahzad Ahmed, NSC RP co-coordinator, and on behalf of my coordinator Priyanka, we are meeting today for the next CultuRisk Tech-Talk and members meeting. The Tech-Talk series is a members-driven initiative. We are now into 9th Tech-Talk, and where members share their work and experiences aligned with the risk preparedness and its thematic areas. So these are some ground rules which you all are aware of. Let's welcome Poonam Trambadia ma'am. She is an architect and has been practicing as a consultant with various private, government, and national and international organizations. She is also can you see the slides, or they are freezed?
The slides are not moving, Shahzad. We can see
okay.
that they are not moving.
Is it now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just start once again. Yeah. Okay, all right. So, let's welcome Poonam Trambadia ma'am. She's an architect and she began her conservation practice in 2006 and is now a consultant to various private, government, national and international organizations. She has a bachelor's and master's in conservation and is also working in academics since 2008. Started with as a lecturer at Government Polytechnic and now presently as associate professor with Anant National University, Ahmedabad. Mr. Madia is also a zonal coordinator for West Zone and EXCOM member for ICOMOS India. She is also a project coordinator for European Union supported CHMV lab with Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation under the partnership project between Ahmedabad and Valladolid, Spain. Apart from the conservation architecture projects, some of our research works aligned includes temple architecture of Western India, urban heritage, governance, studies on the rapidly vanishing Parsi architecture, their culture and their heritage. The topic of today's CultuRisk Tech-Talk is Ms. Poonam will be focusing on the risk due to the heritage tourism in forest areas. She believes that a large amount of attention is given worldwide to risks which are caused by or are after effects of natural disasters. In the past few years, she and her firm has been working on sites which have a combination of nature, history, and culture. The prevalent tourism in these sites is usually the primary source of income in that area, but the insensitivity due to the unmanaged tourism activities possesses a major risk to these culture nature sites. It is this human-generated risk that Ms. Poonam Trambadia will address in the Tech Talk, taking a case example of Polo forest in Gujarat, where she had an opportunity to suggest and help apply some corrective measures. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shahzad. Should I share the slide?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so slides change from what I had said earlier, that instead of doing only Polo, what I have thought is that I'll look at this because there are some sites which we have done through the last few years, which focus on, the sites are very focused on forest nature culture. And so I thought that why not take the challenges that we have faced with these 3-4 sites. And the idea is that not that the other, disasters, they are very, very important and people have been focusing on them with all this climate change and natural disasters and this and that. But what we have seen on these sites is that tourism, though very necessary, also has brought a lot of other impacts, which sometimes are not necessary or not required, or sometimes if not managed properly, create more harm to the site than actually bringing benefits to them. So these are the few sites which we have been working in the last 3-4 years, and which I bring as an overview to bring a discussion to this table, that how do we look at mapping or managing tourism in these sites. And the other thing which we have found in all these sites, the sites which I'm going to discuss today, are largely, though there is tourism, as in visitor tourism, people who go there for enjoyment, or people who go there for the sake of picnics or tourism, or just to enjoy the beauty. Largely, there is a huge group of people who is the pilgrimage tourist, who are just bothered about or who are just focused on the cultural or the religious aspect of their thing, and the rest of the thing they are not worried about. They go, they pray, they do whatever religious activities which are needed, and they come back. So the five sites which I've selected are: one is Champaner Pavagadh, the other is Mount Girnar, the third one is Lonar, Hinglajgarh Fort, and Polo Forest. So these are the five sites which I have selected today. The first site is a World Heritage Site, which has a combination of sacred sites, mountains, settlements, and also the remnants of history in the foothills. What it has, though all the sites have this has a unique and one of the oldest landforms in terms of geology, catchment areas, ecology, etc. Is it moving again? It has stopped moving.
No, it is moving.
Okay. Okay. Then nature and civilization with spectacular setting. Understanding of nature and man working with nature to create storages for water reserves and utilization, and the settlement coming up around it. And a huge amount of archaeology, which is still unexposed. And of course, the best architectural detailing. And then the cultural traditions which are followed here as a part, both in the terms of Hindu religion and also the Islamic traditions. And again, this whole landscape, this whole cultural landscape, which is amidst a huge forest. So this whole natural and cultural site sitting in between the natural site. The second site which is in focus is the mountain range of Girnar, which is one of the most religious places to go to, and huge amount of pilgrims go, not only daily, but especially on the days of Poonam and Amavasya. They walk thousands of miles just to visit the mountain range. Again, this site is, there is at the base is the city. At the top is the Mount Girnar, which is the religious sites for various communities like Jains, Hindus, Muslims, etc., etc. And then you have the peripheral hill range, which is the forest area, which is largely not explored, and it is not open. It is the forest area. Only once in a year it is exposed, it is open for the tourism pilgrimage circuit, which is happening in the area. And then it has this various, there is the Ashokan rock addict at the bottom, which is one of the ancient structures. Then you have the foothills, where you have all these facilities for the pilgrims and the tourists who come, and the sacred site on the top of the hill. And then the restricted mountain range for the humans. And yet you see modern structures coming up on the hill range without thought. The third site is the ruin structure. This is the site of Lonar crater. And this is a site in Maharashtra, which is a saltwater lake, which is formed by a crater. And there are pilgrim sites surrounding the crater. There are 14 temples, and which are accessed by, though there are steps made, there are steps made in local stones. Again, this site is otherwise not very much visited. But the main focus is the Kamla Devi temple, which is again similar to the Champaner Pavagadh temple, Kalika Mata temple, which is visited on either Poonam or Navratri. And at that point of time, there is a huge amount of pilgrimage flow which is coming here. The condition of these structures is in very, very bad state. Apart from that pilgrim and the Kamla Devi temple, nobody otherwise, though these are all protected structures and the document, and ASI had taken this whole understanding of documentation and consolidation and conservation for these structures. In 2007, they started the process. These structures were in a very bad state. Some of them were good, some of them in a very bad state, because when the water of the crater rises, because of the crater, the water in the lake is salt water, and outside of the lake you find fresh water. So once the water of the lake rises, the structures go completely under, majority of the structures till mid-level completely go underwater, and you can see in these photographs the salt deposits and the deterioration which is happening in these structures. So this was the state when we were documenting these structures. And if you can see, half the portion of the structures is white. The other half of the portion is again damaged due to various other reasons. So till then the structure completely gets submerged into the water. And what you see as a ground level is actually the plinth level of the structure. So the structure is still yet further below. This is the top of the crater where you have this kund, and the place where pilgrims come to bathe and purify. And to a level there are religious practices and people come and purify, but recently when we have gone, the use of soaps, shampoos, etc. has started, which, because this water is also, there is a huge, though there is a lake and all, there is a huge water shortage in the area. And when there is water shortage, people use the water of the lake as drinking water, as water for bathing, etc., in their homes also. They come, they fill the buckets and take to their home. In recent practices, a lot of soaps and shampoos which have been used, which have been spoiling the quality of the water. The same water from the kund further continues down below to the Sita Nahani, where it is used for other purposes down below. So the whole stream goes down below and merges with the lake, creating more pollution. The salt water of the lake is, due to meteorite quality or whatever other reasons, is supposed to be of highly good medicinal qualities. And otherwise, largely it is left alone, because during the, unless and until it is the Navratri or the pilgrim season, the rest of the site usually is left alone with very less farming. And because the water is stagnant, there is huge amount of smell in the winters, which is a problem. So people don't enter. But when this pilgrim season comes, the whole lighting and everything is fixed. And when people come, they are so focused on what they are going to worship and move and around, that they are least bothered about what they are destroying, creating complete litter and other garbage. The fourth site which I'm talking about is the archaeological site in the middle of the reserve forest area in Madhya Pradesh. And again, this is a hill fort. So the nearest settlement to the hill fort is somewhere around 9 kilometers. And then you have the town, which is further around 25 to 35 kilometers. And this is the hill fort which you see. And they use the natural terrain as its boundary, and right inside the inside the forest. The challenge here was that because here largely they were not separate monuments, but the conservation of a fort wall. So this is how, this is the fort wall where there was loose mortar masonry, and then you could see layers of construction which had happened through time, the natural terrain which was used as a part of the fort and the fortification. And then these were the layers and things which we gradually found and understood that how the fort would have worked. So there were two major things which, the focus largely to explain this to the government, that this did not require detailed conservation, but more consolidation and measures, so that when the pilgrim comes here or the tourist comes here, they can actually visualize what is historic and also do their religious rites. Two major challenges here were the wall which was broken from above and the other which was broken from below. So these were the two major challenges of consolidation which were here, and not constructing or reconstructing the fort wall which was broken, unless and until it was a very major structural damage or something which is creating further damage. So these were the restorative measures and consolidation measures which were taken, and then the plinth protection to give a clear pathway so that further deterioration does not happen and the pilgrim movement is facilitated. Then there were different archaeological remains that we found in this area, strewn along the whole fort area in different ways and all. This is how we found the site at one point, and to decipher the site in this was something of a challenge. There were these kind of smaller structures which were there over there and which were being used by the pilgrim tourists as kitchen areas. These were somewhere during the Maratha or the late British time, which they would have been added, because at point of time this was also used as a British barrack. And so this is how we had found it in terms of graffiti and burning soot, and this is what they were using it as. Also, parallelly, we had found a huge amount of archaeological remains, so which were numbered, tagged, categorized, and then this whole structure was refurbished into a site museum. The site signage was another thing. So the site signage was also done in the same local stone, and that also became a sitting space and a directional guidance. This kind of temporary sheds then were provided for the people. There were plinths and the temporary sheds which were provided for the people to cook. So because the pilgrims needed to come, though it is only, the nearest town is only 25 kilometers, the terrain is not good and it is not very easily accessible. So people needed to come here, they needed to cook, because once they come here, they would only be able to go at the end of the day. The other intervention was that there was this huge amount of understanding that because it's a pilgrim page, it needed night lighting. So the other intervention which we were able to bring here was that we didn't, because the pilgrims do not stay here beyond 5 or 6 o'clock. And so actually there was no lighting which was required or electricity which was required. So the basic electricity which was required for the people who were staying in the daytime was provided, and the rest of the budget was then translated into facilities and conservation interventions for the site. The fifth site and the main site which I would like to talk about is the Polo Forest. Polo Forest is one site. When we visited there in 2008, so the government of Gujarat had asked us, they wanted to create some facilitation for the people to know the site and understand it as a historic site or a forest site. And that time when we went to the Polo Forest, I remember we went early and there was only one person whom we were able to ask that, where is the Polo Forest and how can we go inside? There was, from the starting to the end of the whole road, we could not find anybody else except for some people who were actually working on the restoration of the temples. At that point of time, somehow we did not get the project. In 2016, again, my family had come down to Ahmedabad and they said that, okay, we need to enjoy, but we need to go to some place where there can be seclusion and we can just enjoy the peace and calm. And I suggested that why not go to the Polo Forest, because this is what it is. There would be peace, calm, and very nice amount of tourism, clean, neat space. And when we reached there, we were horrified because the situation there, because we had gone on a Janmashtami and all the local crowd was there, and the situation there was worse than a next door municipal garden. And to move our car 400 meters from one point to another point, it took us 4 hours. So it was that bad. In just a period of 8 years, the whole situation had changed. So whether it was due to tourism promotion or the lack of understanding of what are the sites that the locals and the others can approach during the time of festivals or holidays or common holidays or combined holidays. So when we, at this point of time, when we were asked to intervene, we took this as opportunity to not only look at the monuments in the region, but also look at it as a site as a whole, because the forest officers here, the sites here are again intertwined in between the forest area, because in the other sites, when we see, there is this localized fort, and then you have the forest area surrounding it. In this particular site, you have a monument and the forest, you have the monument and the forest. So the structures, the historic structures and the sites, or the cultural sites, are strewn in and around the forest, with the local communities there in the surrounding. So the first job, what we did was that we mapped that how does this historic thing work? How do we map that? What are the major spaces that people go to, and what do they look into? And a lot of people, they came to the Polo forest as largely a picnic spot, because if you had a weekend, it was one of the 2 hours from Ahmedabad, and also very accessible from the other side, where there is the so it's Polo basically Polo means a pole or a gate, and it was a gate from Rajasthan. At that point, it was a gate from Rajasthan coming towards Gujarat. So very easily accessible from this side also, very easily accessible from this side also, strewn with historic sites and beautiful green landscape. So we mapped what is there, and then the basic idea which we gave them was that conservation as in consolidation, because recreating these structures was not the idea. The structures are not in worship, though there are locals who do arti and all that, and there is in one of the temples there is a pratima and there arti happens. The idea is not to recreate the structure, but to consolidate it so that they can continue doing their practices. The other temples largely are for visitors to visualize and understand that how a certain historic thing would have evolved, or what were the practices then. So restoration with minimal intervention. And then how do we curb the over footfall? Because during festivals and during common holidays, whereby you could club holidays, the condition was that you could hardly move in that area. And so with this, there was this whole proposal which we aimed to give, that if we could decongest this area during the main pilgrim season or during the festivals. And so we also work not only on working how the circuits can work in the Polo region itself, but there were a lot of small and big other places which can be connected as tours or small circuits with Polo, so that people have this understanding, and the congestion gets translated completely from Polo to these other sites. Stop moving. The other intervention which we were able to bring was the parking facilities and amenities, and COVID did help actually in this situation, because during COVID, during a long time, movement from these places was restricted, and even when it started, they restricted them outside the forest, and they were only allowed to park their vehicles at a certain point, and the local rickshaws, and they were only allowed to take the tourists there. So we were able to give this intervention, that why don't we make the situation permanent, whereby on the outer periphery, on the outer peripheries, if we can give the parking allotments, and we can give battery run vehicles which can be run by the locals, and they can do a to and fro. The other was this cycle tours, because cycle tours was another thing. Sorry, I think I skipped. Okay. Also during this 8-9 years, there was this whole system of hotels and stay areas which was developed. So this was another thing which was attracting the tourists, because they had initially, this was not there, now it was there, but this was also generating local economy. So there was this whole dual situation whereby there is an economic generation, but then when the tourism comes here, the economy generation was going to these hotel groups, because the tour inside the Polo forest is not charged. It is a free of cost tour. Anybody can come, anybody can go, enjoy and go. And this is a situation of cars and parking on non-festival days. So during festival days, this sometimes triplicates or becomes 6 times. And so the first thing was also to identify a separate route whereby it can be made a loop, and this whole passage of the forest could be made as traffic free as possible. So at present, there are local rickshaws which are running, and they have now also started the process of putting e-rickshaws here, which would be run by the locals. So that is one intervention which has become possible. Then there are other activities which the locals can do. So when they come out, there are these other facilities like river rafting, etc., 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 which the locals can have and enjoy at the weekends, bringing the traffic away from the forest region. And this was this brochure which was created, encouraging, because there is this marathon race which happens every year inside the Polo forest. And then we created this brochure, so people who were interested, they could take this small brochure and do a cycle tour of the Polo forest. So yeah, this is. So these were some of the things, and all these sites largely have this understanding of except for Polo, all the other sites have this huge pilgrim ways whereby there is one either Mata Rani temple or the other pilgrim temple, and then you have this whole pilgrim happening. And then this problems of littering, not creating problems, the steps which are done in RCC instead of proper understanding and all. So those local problems were definitely there and prevalent. Yeah, that is from me. A lot of other things are suggested in the Polo forest, and we are hoping that it's a slow process, but we are hoping that we are able to push those also. So thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am, for presenting the work and experiences. Looking at this, it reminds me of in the beginning of this year, I went to this Kashi Vishwanath corridor on an official visit. So I remember the person telling, like we were standing in the courtyard, which was like came up with after all the activities have been done, like construction activities. So they said that the current capacity of that courtyard is 75,000, and that is on 2nd Jan. We are there on, I think, 3rd or 4th January. And on the 1st January, the people, the visitors who came there already crossed 5 lakhs. So the tourist destinations within the forest also, and apart from forest, the tourism numbers are a huge issue to manage. So let's open the floor for the discussion and questions regarding the presentation and work and general discussions, please.
Enjoyed the presentation, Poonam. Good job. Interesting sites. What about making people walk?
Yes.
You know, what I learned from my recent visit to Spiti is that this is just a sharing. I'm just back from Chandratal. Now, in the 2000, people, bikers, all of them were actually living at the bank of the lake, you know, tenting. And it's the local community which decided, even though it is only 3 months which is opened, that this site is accessible. And what they did was they created a buffer with the forest department, 2 kilometers buffer, and then another kilometer where they created the tented sites. Yeah. So it really helped in terms of, and then the vehicles can reach up to a certain point only. Now, at the altitude of 4,500 and whatever, 250 meters from sea level, believe me, when 1 kilometer is a long walk. 10 steps and then you have to pause. It has really helped. And the local community of the tents and people who actually bring about this possibility to have a night stay there is also responsible for the responsible tourism, which I found to be very interesting, because when you are stakeholders, you can't be, expecting only the government to look into issues of managing waste, and we are just too many. So we may have to look into local solutions, but I found walking is a good way. Make people carry, they will carry less and they will litter less. This is something I've learned. So perhaps in more of your work, if you can apply.
Yeah.
And I'm rather shocked about Lonar thing that you're talking about, because as a student, we did, that time Himadpanthi temples and all of that. How did the water level rise? That's the question for you. Because in our times when we were doing the study, and I still have that, as built, the plinths were visible. And this white part of the temple, that's a new to me, that, the scaling of it that is happening on the stones. So what is the reason? Is it just the rains have increased, or somewhere the water is blocked?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, there might be two reasons. One is that this happens largely during the rainy season.
Huh.
And when the rains come, and on the one side, there is a little slope. So on the one side, they are more submerged. On the other side, they are less submerged. And I'm hoping, because Lonar is one, I included Lonar because that was the first project which we did when we started our firm. And since then, I have not been able to look into it, but I'm wanting to look into it again. But that is why I thought that was one thing, because it was a very critical thing, because there actually you have less tourism. But these are the issues which are happening there. So I'm hoping that, but this, what you're saying is it happens more during the rainy season. So the rainy season, the water rises completely and the structures are completely submerged.
Also, I think this, during our study tour time, I remember there was absolutely no religious connotation with any of these temples. Nothing. There was no bathing. There was no, and only forest. One lodge was there, and it was quite miserable to stay the night there. But the best.
That was the thing.
Yeah, but the best, what I remember most is the best starlit sky I have ever seen in my life. And it's almost like, so maybe the policy that the government has to adopt also is to, because there are so many other religious sites where they can do all this puja and snan and all that, and try and delineate, who's actually behind this? There must be the local community.
Yeah.
Or they need to take charge of it, that if it is so sacred, just as in Chandratal, no dipping is allowed. You cannot bathe in that. You cannot stay. Of course, the altitude helps. But even the lake is quite, if I'm not mistaken, you said it has medicinal property, but we were warned not to drink from it.
No, we were not the drinking. It cannot be drunk. But the patri, the or moss, that has the medicinal quality. And
for the skin. For the skin, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is, you cannot dip it. That way, it is very, very dangerous. You cannot do it because it is very, very salty and it is stagnant water.
And it has a smell, huge smell.
Smell.
It is, So why not even push for these scientific facts? Because propagating all these religious, sentiments for these temples, I think this is recent, and one has to speak with the stakeholders there, that there are dangers to it, I think. And I wish you good luck to pursue this, because it's also been one of the first sites, and I'm talking about 1986.
Okay. No, when we documented it in 2007.
So already almost 30 years, no?
Yeah. And
86 2000.
Already the plinths are already many of the temples, the plinths are already submerged, and then you could see in the rainy season still more of this.
Yeah,
And,
but the land also must be sliding down, you know. So
yes.
it's actually the desilting in 30 years, if it is happening, that with rain, the soil is coming down. And that is increasing the water levels, because I clearly remember water being away from the temples and no white scaling. Just to give you,
Yes,
these are all oral
whenever
kind of.
if I'm able to start again and I'm able to pursue this again, I'll call back you. Because when we were
Sure.
studying, the local
Yeah.
scientists, they also
No,
told
I can put
us
you in
that,
touch with the college as well. And this is also, I think, I mean, I must have some drawings as well, hand drawn drawings. I remember sitting with my seniors and rendering all those columns and stuff. So, yeah. I know. I think it must be taken up. And those temples are Himadpanthi temples. That's the name for those. Important site. Very important.
the local scientists told us that 2 meters away from what you see as the salt water, we find potable water.
That must be latest because of the silting. Now the buffer has been caused.
Yes.
Earlier it wasn't there.
Yes.
There was no, only the stream, and they called it some sort of a Ganga, and we all had a laugh. I still remember.
And the
Yeah, towards the north, no?
Yes.
Towards the north was the, and that's about it. And that's where we drank water from, because we were parked there to do the as-built documentation. Yeah, no, it's wonderful site with all its other features. I mean, the only crater, I think, in India, and the largest crater in the world, no?
Yes.
It is, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's the biggest. Yeah, I hope the scientific community also becomes part of it, no? Yes. I think that's where the clue is. Yeah.
And also the pilgrim and the bathing thing has increased recently because there is huge amount of water shortage. So initially when we were documenting, they did not allow people to bring soap. They were allowed to bathe and all those activities happening. They were not allowed to bring soap. And that was very clearly said कि भाई जाके नहा सकते हो, साबुन नहीं ले जा सकते, लेके नहीं जाना. And I could not go, but recently Ashish was able to go there, and that time is when he found out कि वहाँ तो soap सब people have started using everything.
Again, give it a buffer of 2 kilometers. Let the cars be parked away. Nobody will come and bathe. Finished. Make it walkable. Don't allow people to come to critical sites by vehicles.
So that is what we have been trying to suggest in Polo, that if you park away and then people can largely walk, take bicycles or these electric vehicles, because there might be people who can't walk.
Yeah.
So it's a longer stretch.
Yeah.
So that is what we have suggested there, and I think part of it has started happening, and we are hoping that it continues and it goes all the way through.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Great. Nice.
We also ask them to do, I mean, they are very small, but interventions like that, if they don't litter, it is good, but if they can bring litter and submit it, then they'll get some part of the parking fees back. So some small movements like that. And largely the rickshaws and all, if they can be the responsibility of the locals rather than people coming.
When we say locals, I think what we need to do is to identify panchayats.
Yes.
We really need to identify who are the elected members and ask the punch and talk to them and then educate them and help them understand that this will go longer if you do this, otherwise you are cutting your own feet.
Yes.
So, we really need to get the elected heads and address these to them everywhere. That's another lesson, no?
Yes.
For all of us. Wonderful. Nice to see all of these sites. Yeah.
So let me just read a message from Priyanka to you, ma'am. Thank you so much, Poonam ma'am, for sharing your thoughts and encouraging. It's encouraging to see your work boosting local economy with e-rickshaws, cycle tours, etc. Now, she would like to ask a question, which I am reading. How do the locals perceive the amenities for tourists? And during your work with various projects, and especially with Polo, do you deal with biologists and tree specialists in your work?
So in this, because the forest department was also, we have suggested because we were Rajni initially making the IPR for this whole thing and then DPR only for the structures. But in the IPR, we have suggested that this should not be looked only as or separately as archaeology or monuments or parking or tourism. This needs to be looked as a whole. And in that, we have suggested that meetings not only with the locals, but also with the biologists, with the scientists, with the forest departments, the horticulturists, and then it should be a combined thing because each of the other, because the forest department themselves, because these structures are strewn in between the forest, and they have this simple things ke raat ko vehicle jata hai aur we see porcupines sometimes getting hurt. I mean, animals getting hurt. So they have their own concerns there. So in the IPR, yes, we have suggested this, and all these things the government took up during the COVID scenario. So we have suggested a lot of things, which right now I don't think I'm able to tell you everything. I'm hoping that, and I'm actually hoping that it doesn't remain a report and it goes further.
Okay, so when you were showing the Junagadh, that Girnar.
Sorry, Shahzad, one
Yeah.
second. What is IPR?
Initial project report.
Okay.
Sorry.
So when you were showing the project of Girnar, so I remembered I traveled that mountain back in 2012 after completing my bachelor's. We went to Ahmedabad to attend NASA, and that was annual NASA, and then we traveled. So it took us like more than 3-4 hours to travel to that. That was a lifetime journey. So now my question is like regard for the Polo forest. The map shows various commercial developments for accommodation and tourists. So how did did COVID post COVID these things came up post COVID, or they were there?
No. They're there. They were there. That is what I said now, that when we went in 2007, when initially the first thing had come for this, and we were also very fresher then, and we had just started our firm and all. So that time when we went, it was like a jungle. There were people there, but it was almost like a jungle, and we were concerned कि हम जाएं कैसे, किससे पूछे. We couldn't find a soul. And the next time we went in 2016, it was a completely different scenario. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, before COVID, so this whole thing has come up because the tourism, I mean, the government was promoting tourism in Polo. So as a part of that promotion, and then the only thing is that when we went to these hotels also, some of them, they were local people who were running the hotels, but the hotels like Fern and other, which are a group of hotels, they have their own staff and everything, though they would also be, of course, encouraging the local community. But yeah.
All right. So just a general question regarding from the perspective of conservation architect, when you develop or when you intervene in a site, how does the trend of destination development is going along? Like not only focusing with the main site, but to the holistically as a destination. So how does that come up? Or in context to Indian sites, Indian tourists?
I mean, do you say that is it happening frequently, or are you saying that whether it is right or wrong?
My the only well, I have been to various tourism sites and temples and masjids but this is specific to that Kashi Vishwanath corridor. So that project was very good, time bound, targeted, completed in a good time for the tourist. Let's not talk about from an architectural point of view or a conservation. So that is for the tourist. But the other facilities which the tourists need, such as parking. So that parking is way far from that site.
But that is what is good, na?
Yeah, that is actually good. But all the other, like outside that temple, everything is like that only. So when the number of that 5 lakh come up, the things begin to like in a chaotic manner.
That is what the idea is. Now you need to decongest.
Okay.
The problem is that if you increase the size of the container, there are more contents. हर जगह ऐसा ही हो रहा है.
जी.
It is not happening के content के हिसाब से हमने container तो बड़ा कर दिया, but then there are even more contents which are coming in.
But it's a good observation there. And once you come next trip, when you come to Goa, do visit Bondla Wildlife Sanctuary. What they've done is that they have created trails within, yeah, which is open to regular people like you and me. And then there are trails within the park, within the extended national park, which is meant for birders and serious scholars, forest department officials, who are happy to, who actually visit for their own, counting of birds and species. So there could be, this is another way to look into creating an experience of a place. You can't stop, in a democracy, you can't stop people from coming in. But perhaps when we design, there could be asking a few questions as to why people are visiting, and as per that, have different trails. Same was with this UNESCO World Heritage Site in Himachal, the Great Himalayan National Park. There are many trails and treks within. And depending upon the levels of physical ability of people, those trails are open, and which is what gets decided beforehand. So I think there is a requirement to have more number of experiences, and most people would be happy to have one trail, depending upon even, an idea like you want to spend how many hours within that property. People, and the tickets could be priced accordingly. A free one could be, and most people, the least impacted, which can also be well kept. And then there is monetized trails, so that people who are very serious about seeing all the temples or something can pay and then visit. So they would be anyway a little more serious about it, that there is a real intent. It's a suggestion since you're working on it, and I wish you all the very best.
Something like that we have tried to give in Polo. And apart from that, as you were suggesting, that look at the user typology, whereby we found that a large user typology was majorly looking for a weekend getaway or a picnic spot. And so that is why, apart from Polo, then we have suggested, because there are a huge amount of other small spots, historic and recent, which these people could go to and explore. So with the policy or the brochure, if that crowd during the festivals or during this club days can be diverted, also would create a little less congestion to these sites.
But it's not just the congestion, Poonam. I'm trying to say identify vulnerable.
Yes.
Which are the most vulnerable sites, and then segregate that, and only create. It's more like safeguarding.
Yes. I understood. Yeah. Because the forest, the bird trail is separated, so not everybody is allowed in that bird trail. And then there are some sites which are least, they can be easily handled, and there are less harmful, where if anybody and everybody can go and come, which is not a serious tourist or a serious researcher. So something
that's
like
what I meant. Not just decongestion. It's also actually looking into the vulnerabilities, and then kind of looking at carrying capacity of the place.
I think that is why,
and then seeing
also what is happening in Girnar, because the main pilgrim peaks are open to everybody, but the rest of the forest only opens in once a year when there is this Pradakshina which is there. The rest of the time, I think, they do not allow regular tourists to go there. So I think traditionally also they understood this, and I think that was implemented at some point of time.
Good.
So once again, I thank Poonam ma'am and Poonam Verma ma'am also for coming along and having this discussion. Thank you, Poonam Trambadia ma'am, for sharing the work. And so now let's move on to the meeting part.
Thank you, Shahzad. Thanks, Poonam.
Thank you.